I would argue, place Iranians in a context where they are supported to be collaborative, to do group work. They become different creatures.
How has your dual identity, East and West, the nexus that is Fathali Moghaddam, affected how you see the world?
Uh, well, it's affected how I see the world in that I see continuity in human behavior across time and across cultures. You know, we're in a multicultural era and everybody likes to celebrate differences. But for me, the key characteristic of human beings is their commonalities and their continuity across time. And one of these continuities happens to be leadership. Leadership is a key characteristic of all human societies. And in many societies, the leader that is governing is a leader for life. In China, leader for life. In Iran, leader for life. We have a constitution in Iran where the marja taqlid is the main person you are supposed to follow is separate from the supreme leader, but the supreme leader is there for life. And in other societies such as Turkey, such as Russia, they still have sort of constitution, but the leaders arrange it so that in every election they win. So we have lots of leaders for life. So for me, being an Iranian living in America, having grown up most of my life in England, the key theme is continuity of human characteristics across time, across societies. We're essentially the same creatures. We're essentially the same creatures, and we repeat the same patterns of behavior.
See, I love that because I think that's an important part, for example, of an anti-racist message is saying at the end of the day, you know, the continuity of human characteristics. I appreciate that. I preach that. But for the sake of this conversation, I mean, you know, there are people who will say, and we'll say this with some cause. I mean, we'll say, masalan, like the people of the Middle East do not know how to work together, the way the Swedish people do, or the Canadians. So how do we marry that to the continuity of human characteristics?
Well, it's a great question. I would ask you to think about the Iranians who are living abroad right now in America, in Europe, in other places. I'm sure you know, and I know, many Iranians who collaborate in excellent ways with others. They do group projects. I know them in research. I know them in industry. These people, if they were in Iran, they would not be able to do that. So what is it about? Is it the person or the context? I would argue, place Iranians in a context where they are supported to be collaborative, to do group work. They become different creatures. What has happened in Iran and a number of other societies is leadership, and particularly dictatorial leadership, has created a context where there is distrust between individuals, where individuals cannot cooperate with each other and cannot be productive.
Right. But I'll gently push back. I say this with some sadness. Yes, of course, I know some people who work in collectives, et cetera, who are Iranian. But for the most part, I feel like we've migrated a lot of those tendencies. I mean, if they're not in our DNA, then they haven't elapsed in us from the Iranian experience, because I do see that mistrust in our community. I do see sectarianism in our community. I do see the inability to get along because we're always looking over our shoulder. What does that guy want? You know, all of the things that,
Yes.
I mean, so how do we explain that?
There is some of that within Iranian groups, but you look at those Iranian individuals at their work. See, I know some scientists, for example, Iranian scientists in places like the NIH and other places, where they're incredibly productive and they don't have any of these characteristics of suspicious, you know, being constantly wary of others. See, when groups of Iranians gather, they reformulate, reconstruct what they had in Iran. They're bringing over part of that culture.
Right.
But as individuals, when we're put in a different context, we behave differently. So my point is that the Iranian context needs to change, and it needs a different type of leadership to change it.